Pauli Murray, Ella Baker, Asa Randolph, Daisy Bates. These are just a few of the civil rights activists that played a significant role during the height of the civil rights movement. Their contributions were great, yet rarely are they mentioned in the very same breath as a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. Many devoted their lives, risking death and danger, to stand for equality and fight for the rights of African Americans. Yet unfortunately, so very few of these civil rights icons truly get the recognition they so rightfully deserve. For every Rosa Parks, there's a Claudette Colvin, a 15-year-old who refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus 9 months before Rosa Parks did. For every Thurgood Marshall, there's a James Meredith, an activist who led a solo march from Tennessee to Mississippi to promote voter registration. This year, I hope you join us in celebrating some of the many voices that go unheard throughout African American history. This year, we seek to honor Black History Month by celebrating the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Carrington. Today, I will be serving as the administrator and facilitator of our event. I would like to introduce Chief Justice John D. Minton Jr. to provide us with his opening remarks. Chief Justice Minton.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon and welcome to the second annual Administrative Office of the Court's Black History Month celebration. Because of the pandemic, of course, we're celebrating a little differently this year than we did last, but I'm honored to bring you virtual greetings on behalf of myself and the entire Supreme Court of Kentucky. My fellow justices and I hope that you're staying safe and staying healthy during these difficult times. I'll begin today by thanking Patrick Carrington, our Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator, for putting together this event and especially for all his work on the video that we all just watched. I've been glad this month to learn more about the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement and appreciate Patrick highlighting these important figures in our country's history. And I want to take this opportunity to repeat some of the remarks that I made this past summer when I testified before the General Assembly's Interim Joint Judiciary Committee about the racism and injustice that continues to oppress here in the Commonwealth and all across the country. As my friend in North Carolina, the former Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, said when addressing this issue in her own state, the protests that we witnessed across the country last summer bring front and center the sad fact that racism and prejudice, as she said, have remained stubbornly fixed and resistance to change. As a justice system, we must be willing to admit our failures. And we must be willing not only to listen, but to hear the very valid concern raised by those who've been marginalized, those who've been degraded, or those who've been made to feel less than. The court system and the legal profession must continue to advocate for a diverse bench and a diverse bar to reflect the communities that we all strive to serve. We must continue to improve communication between the courts and the court's justice partners and all of those justice-involved participants. And we must constantly evaluate and address institutional racism and our own implicit biases. I recognize that all of us, have a long way to go, but I'm pleased with the progress Kentucky's court system has made over the past few years to provide diversity and cultural inclusion, cultural collision trainings to all judges, clerks, specialty court staff, and pretrial staff all across the Commonwealth. And I'm especially proud of the work of the Kentucky Court of Justice is doing to address racial and ethnic disparities within the court system itself. Since 2014, our work on these issues has become more intentional and more targeted and have resulted in remarkable improvements for the individuals and families who come in contact with our court system. Last October, we shared our journey to culture change with the introduction of a guide for identifying, addressing, and reducing racial and ethnic disparities, which documents the four-step model we're now using to reduce disparities within the court system. In many ways, this work was triggered by the sweeping reforms to the Kentucky Juvenile Code that occurred in 2014. Although highly successful and laudatory in its intent, these reforms primarily benefited white youth and unintentionally exacerbated the disproportionate and disparate outcomes for youth of color in Kentucky's justice system. And when the reality of this disproportionality in our justice system was presented, we acted to address it. And this work evolved into a model that we are now using throughout the Court of Justice. The guide that we've created presents a model for any organization to identify disparities, construct strategies to address the disparities, institutionalize effective changes, and then reevaluate progress for continuous quality improvement. Our hope is that the work we've done and we have found to be effective can support the work of other organizations and local courts in addressing racial and ethnic disparities. Thank you again for this opportunity to be here virtually with you today. Patrick, back to you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Minton. At this moment in time, providing us with a very warm greeting, I would also like to introduce the Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, Ms. Lori K. Dungeon. Lori?
Patrick, thank you. And thank you for the wonderful job you've done putting this program together. I'm excited to see the second celebration in the Kentucky Court of Justice honoring Black History Month. I also want to take a minute to thank our Chief Justice Minton, for his leadership and vision around this issue and for really encouraging us to push forward beginning in 2014 with this work. As many of you may know, Black History Month is an annual celebration of African American achievement and a time to recognize their critical story and role in our nation's history. Also known as African American History Month, it was the brainchild of noted historian Carter Woodson. Since 1976, every United States president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world also devote a month to celebrate Black history. We especially want to thank our neighbors, Canada, and our friends in the United Kingdom for the time they spend on their country's history with respect to the issues around African American achievements. Patrick, again, thank you for your excellent work on this. And I am so proud of the progress that we have made in the past few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Dungeon. The first half of our program will consist of a presentation from our keynote speaker, Pastor Edward L. Palmer. Pastor Edward L. Palmer Sr. is the visionary, senior pastor, and co-pastor with his wife, Elizabeth Palmer, for the Sign of the Dove Church International, located in Radcliffe, Kentucky. He is a certified diversity trainer and works to eliminate disproportionate minority contact within the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. In 2017, Pastor Palmer was the recipient of the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award, presented by Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, as well as the Courage for Kids Award, presented by the nonprofit organization, the Kentucky Youth Advocates. In May of 2019, he was awarded the Thurgood Marshall Social Justice Impact Award, presented by Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Pastor Palmer currently serves as the chair of the State Interagency Council's Diversity Standing Committee and the chair of the National Coalition for Juvenile Justice. He is a certified racial and ethnic disparities capstone project fellow through the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform at Georgetown University. He has served the citizens of Radcliffe, Kentucky for 5 terms as a Radcliffe City Councilman and is currently serving as a certified police chaplain. He has shared his passion for racial equality with audiences from all across the nation. And his implicit bias training is currently in the process of being evaluated by Johns Hopkins University. Pastor Palmer operates with undeniable vision and unyielding passion for the purposeful course on which God has set him, running his race with patience, diligence, vigilance, and effectiveness. We have the pleasure of having Pastor Palmer's father attending today's presentation, Mr. Joe Palmer. Thank you for attending, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Pastor Edward L. Palmer.
Thank you, Patrick, for that great introduction. I appreciate all that you do. Let me start by saying that I'm humbled for this opportunity to speak at the Kentucky Court of Justice 2021 Black History Month event. To be honest, I never thought that I would have the privilege to speak before such a distinguished group when I began my social justice journey over 20 years ago. This is such a big deal that, as Patrick mentioned, I even told my dad about it. And hopefully he's watching. So in case he is, hi, Dad, look at me. You are my unsung hero. I want to start by also acknowledging the passion, the commitment, the leadership of a few champions within the Kentucky Court of Justice. Let me begin with Chief Justice Minton and the justices of the Kentucky Supreme Court for their commitment to achieve a more inclusive and equitable justice system. It's important when you're working on a more just system that the leaders of the court system champion this effort. You all do that every day. And for that, you are our unsung heroes. I also would like to recognize Court of Appeals Chief Judge Clayton for her passion as a champion in pursuing racial equity within the court system. Her voice has been a guiding light to this work. And to the judges of the appellate circuit and district court benches, as well as the circuit clerks who work daily to achieve and lift up equal justice for all. But a special thanks and recognition to the Black and brown judges who serve as the first fruit champions of a harvest planted generations ago. By example, you show every day the achievements capable of all people of color. I'd also like to publicly recognize Chief of Staff Katie Shepard, AOC Director Dungeon, Deputy Director McGinnis, and the Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator, you've all met, my little brother from a different mother, Patrick Carrington, for prioritizing this work within human resources as well as within the statewide programs at the Court of Justice. I would also like to thank the executive officers at AOC. And finally, I would like to recognize Justice William E. McNulty, Jr. as a great champion within the judicial branch. In fact, I wish I had the privilege of meeting the justice, because I believe the conversations we could have had in pursuing racial equity would have had a lifelong impact upon my racial consciousness. In 2020, this nation faced an all-out frontal assault on the ideas of equality and justice for all that were envisioned in our nation's Declaration of Independence. It was an assault that caused some to wonder if Martin's dream would ever be a reality for all. But I will not doubt. Instead, I will continue to hope. I will continue to believe in the words of Dr. King, that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of his creed. The great Black prophet Howard Truman spoke to the hope that lies within the soul of Black people, who in the face of fatal hopelessness believe in hope. When he said, "We must not scale down the horizon of our hopes and our dreams and our yearnings to the level of events of our lives." So why do we celebrate Black History Month? Is it important to celebrate Black history? Black History Month evolved out of the Negro History Week, which was initially started by Carter G. Woodson and a preacher by the name of Jesse E. Moreland. This duo started the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And from this work came Negro History Week. In 1926, these two men and a group of others sponsored the first National Negro History Week. They chose the week of February in which the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. By the 1960s, what started out as a week-long celebration in recognition of Black accomplishments and sacrifice was beginning to become a month-long event on college campuses and in cities around this country. In 1976, President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month by calling on the public to honor the contributions to our nation and the accomplishments of Black Americans throughout the nation's history. We celebrate Black history so that we might continue to learn of the magnitude Black lives have had on American life and culture. We learn about people like Sarah Boone, who in 1892 designed the much improved ironing board we use today. Or the New York nurse, Mary Van Brenton Brown, who in 1966 co-invented her own home security system, which received a patent in 1969, and various elements of her design are used in security systems today. We learn about people like Garrett Morgan, who in 1923 invented the three-light traffic light system, improved the sewing machine and gas mask. And these are just a few of his many inventions. He also became the first Black person in Cleveland, Ohio to own a car. And then there's Frederick McKinley Jones, born in Covington, Kentucky, who in 1940 invented the refrigerated truck. And Percy Julian, a Black chemist, who was not allowed to attend high school, but went on to earn his PhD. And his research led to the development of drugs to treat glaucoma and arthritis. And he is regarded as one of the most influential chemists in American history. Now, I could go on and on with the list of inventors, educators, jurists, politicians, doctors, advocate, community leaders, athletes, and businessmen and women. And it would fill every moment of every day of Black History Month and every other month, because there's an incalculable number of Black Americans who have made tremendous contributions in every field, in every occupation, in every generation, since our ancestors were brought to the shores of this nation. The history of Black Americans is rich with unsung heroes and sheroes, men and women who made contributions to their communities, cities, states, and the nation that went without celebration. Our theme for this occasion is honoring the unsung heroes of the Civil Rights Movement. Now, history records the Civil Rights Movement having to occur during the time period from the late 1940s to the 1960s, late 1960s. But I submit to you that the struggle of Black people for citizenship, freedom, equality, justice, equal employment, equal housing, equal access to healthcare, and for civil and human rights started that day in August of 1619, when that first slave ship loaded with Black bodies kidnapped from the distant lands of Africa, and continues to this very day. So today, let's celebrate a few of the unsung heroes and sheroes of the unsung movement for civil rights during slavery and Jim Crow. Heroes like Robert Smalls, born April 5th, 1839, died February 23rd, 1915. Robert Smalls was born a slave, but he died a free man. He freed himself and his crew, along with their families, from slavery on May 13, 1862, when he led an uprising aboard a Confederate transport ship, the CSS Planter, in Charleston Harbor. And he sailed it north to freedom. In fact, it was his courageous act that helped to persuade President Abraham Lincoln to accept African-American soldiers into the Union Army. And then there's Martin Delany, born May 6, 1812, died January 24th, 1885. Martin Robinson Delany was born a free man and died a free man. Martin Robinson Delany was an African-American abolitionist, journalist, physician, and writer. He was born in Charlestown, West Virginia, then a part of Virginia, a slave state. He was an outspoken Black nationalist, arguably the first, and is considered by some to be the grandfather of Black nationalism. He was also one of the first 3 Blacks admitted to Harvard Medical School. Trained as an assistant and a physician, he treated Black patients or patients during the cholera epidemics of 1833 and 1854 in Pittsburgh, when many doctors and residents fled the city. He was active in recruiting Blacks for the United States colored troops. He was commissioned as a major, the first African-American field grade officer in the United States Army during the American Civil War. And then there's William Steele, born October the 7th, 1821, died July 14th, 1902. Born in New Jersey to formerly enslaved parents. And at the age of 23, he moved to Philadelphia and took up the abolitionist mantle. He taught himself to read and to write, got a job as a clerk for the Pennsylvania Abolitionist Society, and advanced through the organization until he was named chairman of the new Vigilance Committee in the early 1850s. In that position, he oversaw a network of safe houses, using his own home among them. He raised money to finance key rescue missions, including a few of Harriet Tubman's. It is estimated that Steele ferried about 800 people to freedom during his tenure. Steele also documented the stories of more than 600 escapees and published them all in a groundbreaking volume called The Underground Railroad in 1872, making him the only Black person ever to write and self-publish a first-hand account of activity on the Underground Railroad. There were other unsung heroes and sheroes of the Underground Railroad, like Harriet Bell Hayton and Lewis Hayton, the Kentucky couple that escaped to Canada and eventually settled in Boston and opened a clothing store, joined the Boston Vigilance Committee, and turned their home into a boarding house. In fact, they were credited with saving hundreds of enslaved people who escaped to free states from bounty hunters who were emboldened by the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 that stated enslaved people could be hunted down and returned to their enslavers. And then there was Claudette Colvin, born September 5th, 1939. Now, we've all heard about and celebrated the bravery of Rosa Parks for not giving up her seat on the bus. But it was Claudette Colvin who on March the 2nd, 1955, a full 9 months before Rosa was arrested, who was dragged off a bus in Montgomery, Alabama at the age of 15. She was arrested and taken to an adult jail. She was the first person to be arrested for defying bus segregation in Montgomery. It was her courage, her story, and her trauma, which has long been forgotten, that provided the spark for the Black community that ultimately led to Rosa Parks' actions and the bus boycott and the Supreme Court ruling to end segregation on buses. Now, I stated earlier that the fight of Black folk for civil rights started not in the 1940s, but in 1619, And it did not end with the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not end with the passage of the 13th Amendment. It did not end with the Civil Rights Act of 1866, or the 14th Amendment, or the 15th Amendment. It did not end with the Supreme Court's 1954 ruling Brown v. Board of Education, or the Civil Rights Act of 1957, or the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Fair Housing Act of 1966 did not end the struggle for civil rights, nor did employment discrimination laws, fair banking laws, or hate crime laws end the fight for civil rights for Black and brown folks in America. Last year, we were confronted with the traumatizing and polarizing trifecta of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. We also witnessed as COVID-19 took advantage of the cumulative disadvantages that Black people have faced along this journey. You see, Blacks have always disproportionately experienced poverty, unemployment, segregated and environmentally degraded housing conditions, incarceration and violence at the hands of some in law enforcement. Black communities have always been the most vulnerable and least prepared to come through cataclysmic events like a hurricane or a drug epidemic or even a global pandemic. And yet the struggle for civil rights, equal justice, equal access to the best our country presents goes on to this very day. A day we have gathered to honor the unsung heroes of the continuous movement towards civil rights for all. Now, there are unsung heroes and sheroes among us who may not ever make the front page of a local paper or the evening news. There may never be a quote attributed to them or a book written about them. They have and are making a difference in the continued work of equal justice and equitable treatment for Black Americans. So as I wrap up my presentation today, I must again mention the various heroes and sheroes that you work with every day to achieve equal justice within the court of justice. So here are a few. Let me start by mentioning the Jefferson County Circuit Clerk, David Nicholson, and his staff, who are utilizing the Chief Justice's Guide for Identifying, Addressing, and Reducing Racial and Ethnic Disparities to discuss diversity within their workforce and service they provide to the public. These conversations are focused around ways to increase diversity and increase opportunities for diversity. Family and Juvenile Services has also utilized the guide to institutionalize policy and practice changes, such as annual racial equity assessments, performance measures and outcomes by race, the development of local action plans in the top 10 racial and ethnic disparate counties, the formation of the FJS Equity Committee, ongoing training initiatives and dialogues to address racial inequities. Because of these unsung heroes across the court of justice, the outcomes for the youth, for all youth, have been phenomenal. Since the 2014 statewide juvenile justice reforms and the strategic, and I may add intentional efforts of so many unsung heroes and sheroes, there's been a 35% decrease in complaint filings for Black youth, a 39% decrease in detention for Black youth, 33% decrease in failure to appear for Black youth in the state of Kentucky. In Jefferson County, there's been a 60% decrease in failure to appears. County attorney overrides have decreased by 92% for Black youth. In Christian County, the site of the Racial and Ethnic Disparity Capstone Project, we've seen a 55% decrease for judicial overrides from 2018 to 2019, and a 39% decrease in complaints filed on Black youth in the same time period. This effort, however, has required a core community response to improve outcomes for kids of color by working with local partners, local prosecutors, defense attorneys, school officials, law enforcement, and community leaders. But it doesn't stop there. Pretrial and specialty courts have been entrenched in the work of racial equity in their respective departments, seeking to use the Racial and Ethnic Disparity Guide to identify racially disparate outcomes and develop strategies to address and reduce the disparate treatment of minority populations. So I end by giving you a list of 10 qualities to help you identify the unsung heroes and sheroes among you of this continuous struggle for racial justice. Those 10 qualities are patience, courage, compassion, empathy, humility, confidence, ingenuity, selflessness, perseverance, and honesty. Thank you for this opportunity, and may God bless the Kentucky Court of Justice. Back to you, Patrick.
Wow, Pastor Palmer. Thank you so much for that very powerful and moving presentation. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. Thank you. We are now going to move into our second part of the program, where I will introduce our panelists and ask each of them a set of questions in which they will respond. Each of these questions will revolve around Black History Month, diversity in the judicial system, and our theme for this year's event, celebrating our unsung heroes. Our first panelist today is Court of Appeals Judge Pamela R. Goodwine. Judge Goodwine was elected to the Kentucky Court of Appeals in November 2018 to serve Division I of the 5th Appellate District. Before her election to the Court of Appeals, Judge Goodwine was Chief Regional Circuit Judge for Fayette County. She has served as a circuit court judge since November of 2003. She served as a district court judge from August of 1999 until November of 2003. Judge Goodwine received her undergraduate degree from the University of Kentucky, Carroll Martin Gatton College of Business in 1991. She graduated from the University of Kentucky College of Law in 1994. She was admitted to practice law in the Commonwealth of Kentucky in October of 1994. She was in private practice with the law firm of Wyatt, Tarrant, and Combs from 1994 until her appointment to the district court bench in August of 1999. Her primary practice area was labor and employment law. Prior to her appointment to the bench, Judge Goodwine chaired the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. She also served as commissioner of that agency as well. Judge Goodwine was inducted into the Carroll Martin Gatton College of Business and Economics Alumni Hall of Fame in February of 2000. She was named the Fayette County Bar Association's Outstanding Young Lawyer in May 2001. On September 21st, 2012, Judge Goodwine received the Henry V. Pennington Trial Judge of the Year Award from the Kentucky Justice Association. Judge Goodwine also served as a Fayette County Drug Court Judge from 2011 until her election to the Kentucky Court of Appeals. In March of 2018, Judge Goodwine received the 2018 Women Making History Award from the Kentucky Commission on Women. And in April of 2018, she received the Carl Bashir Walking by Faith Award from the Carter G. Woodson Academy. In 2020, she was recognized by the Kentucky Gazette as one of 2020's notable women in Kentucky politics and government. In June 2012, Judge Goodwine was certified as a jazzercise fitness instructor. She enjoys motivational speaking, teaching fitness classes, and watching sports. Judge Goodwine is married to Lee A. Paget Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Judge Pamela Goodwine.
Thank you, Patrick.
Oh, no problem, no problem. Our second panelist today is Chief District Judge Derek Reed. Judge Clyde Derek Reed was born on December 31st, 1958, in the beautiful city of Glasgow, Kentucky. He's the son of late Robert L. Reed and Etta J. Reed Perry. Judge Reed was raised on a farm in the Uno community of rural Hart County, Kentucky, and initially attended a segregated elementary school called Carter Dowling, but later attended an integrated school called Munfordville Elementary. He graduated from Hart County High School and received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Government and Economics from Western Kentucky University. Judge Reed obtained his Juris Doctor degree while attending Washington University in St. Louis School of Law on a full academic scholarship. He later returned to Kentucky and practiced law until his appointment to the bench in April of 2001. Judge Reed currently serves as the Chief Regional Judge for the Green River District. Judge Reed is happily married to Darrell Burton Reed and has 5 children, 1 son-in-law, and 1 beautiful granddaughter. He is active in several civic organizations and resides on a 136-acre farm in LaRue County, Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Judge Clyde Derek Reed. Our third and final panelist for today is District Judge Melissa Moore Murphy. The Honorable Judge Melissa Moore Murphy is a 1998 and 2001 graduate of the University of Kentucky. In 1998, she received her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and History in the Honors Program with a minor in vocal music performance. She received her Juris Doctor from the J. David Rosenberg College of Law in 2001. Judge Murphy started her legal career as a staff attorney for the Honorable Judge Rebecca M. Overstreet. In 2002, she became a criminal prosecutor. For over a decade, she had the opportunity to work on every level of the prosecutorial system. In 2014, she continued her legal career in public service when she joined the Lexington-Fayette Urban County Government's Law Department as a senior attorney. On April 14, 2020, Governor Andy Beshear appointed Melissa to the vacant Fayette District Court seat. She was sworn in as the 4th Division Fayette District Court Judge on April 24, 2020. In November 2020, Melissa was elected as the 4th Division District Court Judge to serve the remainder of the term. In July of 2020, Judge Murphy was appointed by Mayor Linda Gordon to serve on the Commission for Racial Justice and Equality, specifically on the Law Enforcement, Justice, and Accountability Subcommittee. She was recently named the Fayette County Bar Women Lawyers Association 2020 Woman of the Year and one of the Kentucky Gazette's 2020 Notable Women in Kentucky Politics and Government. Judge Murphy is also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Of all of her accomplishments, her greatest joy is being the mother of her 3 children, Terrence, Makari, and Micah. She is happily married to Danny Murphy Jr., the Senior Assistant Dean of Community Engagement and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Kentucky J. David Rosenberg College of Law. Ladies and gentlemen, our final panelist of today, Judge Melissa Moore Murphy. Panelists, at this time, I'm going to ask each of you a set of questions that I hope will both educate and inspire our audience today. We will start each question with Judge Pamela Goodwine. We will then move to Judge Derek Reed, and we will end each question with Judge Melissa Moore Murphy. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin the panel discussion. Each of our panelists today have thrived in a field where there is not a plethora of diversity, particularly as it pertains to race. Judge Goodwine, my first question today is, at any point throughout your career, has it ever been challenging being one of maybe a few minorities in the criminal justice field?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you again for this program today. And thank you for putting the panel together. And I welcome serving with my fellow panelists. I have to answer yes to that question. There have been many moments that I've found to be very challenging One occurred very early on. Actually, it was prior to my career beginning, but I had thoughts of becoming an attorney. And in wanting to develop that passion and wanting to develop the idea of becoming an attorney, it was in 1977 as a junior in high school when I walked into our county courthouse only to find no one that looked like me. There were no African Americans in the entire courthouse, and there were no women. The men who I had to interview were white males who seemed to be a bit put off by the fact that I even wanted to pursue a career in law and suggested some other alternatives. It only pushed my passion even further to pursue my legal career. But once entering the career path, once I became a judge, I thought surely things would be different once taking the bench, only to find that there were some very challenging moments, both at the district court level and at the circuit court level. I haven't been on the Court of Appeals bench very long, but those two challenges came in the very same way, which is why I want to emphasize them. And both at the district court level and the circuit court level, when I became ready to become chief judge, the process by which electing our chief judge seemed to change when I was in line to assume that role. And I thought, why is that? When all the time before me, we had done it by seniority, but yet when I was senior and most senior to assume that role, then suddenly it became a let's vote on who should be chief judge. And as a district court judge and only being a judge for a short period of time, I just simply took that as, okay, well, we know why that is. But then after my service on the bench, on the circuit court bench, after serving 8.5 years as vice chief, when our chief judge retired and I was next in line to become chief, suddenly the rules changed again. And it suddenly became, let's vote on this, as opposed to you will automatically become chief judge. And so suddenly I had to think there's something going on here. There's something perhaps wrong with this picture. And I let my feelings be known and the position be known. And suddenly we no longer had to vote on the issue. That I assumed the role as chief and served in that capacity until being elected and assuming my current position on the Court of Appeals. So if I serve in this capacity long enough, hopefully if I seek to assume the role of chief of the Court of Appeals at some point, then hopefully the rules will be as they have been all along.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Judge Goodwine. And I appreciate you being transparent. And also, I thank you for being vocal in that situation and letting your feelings be known. I think that's beautiful. That is beautiful. Judge Derek Reed, have you had similar experiences or similar challenges?
You always have those challenges. It's just the way that it is. When you chose this profession, even when you chose to go to law school, even if you chose the classes that you chose to prepare for law school, there's always that challenge. You're always the only one or one of a few. It's just the way that it is. I went to a law school where we had about 600 students overall. And in the city of St. Louis, which has an extremely large Black population, there's about 20 of us out of 600 law students. That's not very many in 3-year classes. And so you get accustomed to it. I remember we made a push to the chancellor, to the dean, about the inclusion of more African Americans into the law school at WashU. And at the time I was the president of the BALSA, which is the Black Law Student Association. And we asked questions. We said, well, why are we, what's going on here? And I realized it's a private institution. I realize it's expensive. And the key to getting more inclusive diversity is going to be open your pocketbook. So that's going to be a real big key, you know. but we met and we talked, and I started asking questions. I said, well, okay, let's take a look at how we're recruiting. Where are we recruiting at? And I found that we were recruiting at some very fine institutions, but they were largely Caucasian institutions, mostly white population. Why are we going to Grinnell College? That's an hour. Why are we going here? Why are we going there? Why are we not going to Xavier University in New Orleans? Why are we not recruiting out of Morehouse? Why are we not going to Fisk, Howard, other places where we have a better shot? You know, we were in the law school that I attend, and we were in competition with Duke University and a number of other low tier 1 institutions. And I said, you got to open your pocketbook up. And so the thing we were able to do, and it's a small achievement, but my last year as I was going out, what our committee was able to do, we were able to get over 30 attendees, 1-year students at WashU as I was going at my senior year. Keep in mind, we had 20 for 3 classes when I came in, and the following year we were down like 12 overall. And so it's a small achievement, but it was an achievement. The point I'm making is you're always going to be by yourself. You're always going to find yourself isolated and limited. You just got to make sure that your voice is heard. You just got to make sure that you keep in mind where you come from, and that you just, and this is difficult sometimes, not to take anything personally. It's all about moving the process. It's all about trying to make a difference. It's all about making sure that your legacy is there for the next individual who comes along behind you. And so if you do that, I think that you made your mark. So it's always going to be there because the profession is what it is. You're going to be in a room where out of 200, there's probably going to be 4 or 5 of you. It's just the way that it is. When I mean 4 or 5, I mean 4 or 5 African-American, brown, or black people. And it's just part of the territory. And I remember I've been doing this for a long time. And I mean, Judge Goodwine and I, we started close at the same time. I remember us serving together, and she can tell you it's 4 or 5 of us on any given day. That's about it. And it's better in some ways, but I don't know that that's going to change because of the nature of the profession and what it is. But we need to be more inclusive. We need to make efforts to have continue to push. We need to encourage our young people to aspire to be attorneys, to aspire to be judges, to aspire to be justices. We need to make sure that they understand that the only thing that can stop them is them. And we need to make sure we have avenues open for them to make sure that is the case, so that we know that if this young person from a rural area or from an urban area wants to achieve, they can. One other thing I'll note, and this I was fascinated because a few years ago we had a conference, and I happened to share the conference with Judge Clayton, who's a close friend. And Judge Clayton and I were talking, and we were sharing our experiences growing up, me in rural Kentucky, her in Louisville. And I was struck by something she was saying. It's counterintuitive. You would think growing up in a small rural area that the abject racism we faced growing up would be much greater in rural area than I'm from. I found that wasn't the case. It was actually the opposite of that. She encountered things and I was like, oh, wow. That didn't happen in my experience. Now, I grew up in a segregated school initially, but I did not share the same just abject discrimination that they seem to face in Louisville, which is counterintuitive. Growing up in Horse Cave and Mumfordville, and it's just that was striking to me. And so sometimes you got to be careful because there's an assumption you can make that you shouldn't make, and you got to understand that with people too. And so you got to take people at face value, and you can't make any assumptions. I recall someone stopped. I was on the side of the road, stopped one time, and people that I thought would stop for me passed right by. There's this old guy with I guess one would call him a redneck look, and he had a Confederate flag in a truck, and he stopped, and I'm like, oh, what's this going to be about? Can I help you, sir? And he helped, and we got things going. And so you gotta You got to take people. And I learned that, and I was like, okay, I had an assumption that I made automatically, and I shouldn't have made it because he was as generous as one could be. He was kind. I was dying to ask him what was that Confederate flag about and give him my version of my experience and what I think that it means, but we didn't go there. And so you got to learn. You got to learn. And that was a great learning experience for me because I had to rethink my assumptions. And that's what I love about life. You always are in a position where you're rethinking your assumptions. You can't make an assumption. You can't make an assumption. This person's has got a Confederate flag and he's just this way, or this person's an intellectual individual and he thinks a different way. I've learned over the long haul that you can't make any kind of assumptions. And so that's the other thing I like to say to you, that just be open-minded whenever you meet anyone, because you never know what you're going to see, how you're going to impact someone. So.
Wow, that is so true, Judge Reed. So true. We have to be able to take people as they are. Absolutely. And
in fact, empathy was a big. Reverend Palmer said empathy. It's an extreme. It's a must, I think, for a judge. You must be empathetic. You must try to understand where they're coming from in order to make a difference, and particularly when you're trying to impact young people's lives. So.
Absolutely. And Judge Reed, I would say that's for everybody. We all could become more empathetic with everyone we deal with on a regular basis. So thank you, Judge Reed. Judge Murphy, have you experienced any challenges?
Thank you, Patrick. And again, thank you for the introduction. And I am honored to just be here. And just to echo with both what Judge Goodwine and what Judge Reed said, of course, we all have picked a profession that we find ourselves as being the only lots of times, and the percentage of us just by numbers alone. We were able to publish and display kind of a photo grid of all of the Black judges in the Commonwealth. And there's 14 of us out of 200 and plus of us. So we all find ourselves in before we've gotten to these roles, being the only ones, whether it be law school, whether it was undergrad, whether it was in high school. And so we have learned to adapt to that, but that doesn't mean it didn't come with challenges. So of course, I could name off such, great or different challenges, specifically law school. I think it was similar to what Judge Reed said. I was thinking, I think probably in the law school during that 3-year period, there was never more than 25 of us out of 390 at UK. And I commend the law school for doing a great job now as it relates to recruitment and diversifying the student body. But when you walk into that situation, the challenge wasn't the fact that there were so few of us, because we had all grew up with that. We'd all grew up with that through high school and in undergrad. But the challenge was we now found ourselves in a profession where, or a law school where folks were kind of aiming that they didn't think we belonged to be there. And so you had to gather around each other and protect one another. And so the Black Law Students Association, it became kind of our little cove and our little hideout to make sure we pushed one another to succeed, because we knew going in, we were going to be challenged. We recognized that, but it's not about just what the challenge is how you overcome that challenge. So I'll leave it there that I think yes, our profession is one, but we chose it. As I always say, I signed up for this job and I'm excited to have it, but it's how you work within that challenge to overcome it.
Judge Murphy, I think I can speak for myself and our entire audience when I say we are glad that all of our African-American judges made that decision. We really appreciate you, and it's needed, Okay. My second question for you all today is somewhat of a follow-up question to that. Were there any individuals that you looked up to as you pursued your career as an attorney or a judge? And when I speak of these individuals, I'm speaking particularly to minorities as it pertains to race.
I can think of two individuals, particularly the first being Judge Gary D. Payne, who was the first African-American judge in Fayette County. But when I met him as a professor in Carol Martin Gatton College of Business as a business law professor who taught me one of my first classes, my first semester in undergrad. And it was actually 3 months after moving to Lexington. And so we chatted, and I expressed to him my interest in becoming a judge. I expressed to him, the goals that I had, and he was more than willing to sort of take me under his wing. And he followed me throughout my career and encouraged me along the way, and helped when I decided to obviously run for judge. And when I was elected, I became the first African-American female elected in Fayette County. So we shared that bond. And the second individual is J. Michael Brown, who is now working in the Bashir administration. He was a partner at Wyatt Terry Combs when I was hired there, and he worked in Louisville, but I was the only African-American hired in the Lexington office. And he sort of took me under his wing and helped me understand how important it was for us to help with diversity and expand diversity at Wyatt Terry Combs. And so I saw it as my opportunity to introduce other African Americans to the law firm of Wyatt Terry Combs and show them that they could have lucrative careers there as well.
Thank you, Judge Goodwine. Judge Reed.
I had, I guess, somewhat of a disadvantage because one of the things that I realized coming back to Kentucky, that if you attend Chase or you attend University of Louisville or University of Kentucky, there's a built-in network that you have that really does serve you well. I didn't have that. And so when I moved back from St. Louis back to Kentucky, I thought about moving back to rural Kentucky. I talked to 2 or 3 attorneys who expressed some interest, but also questioned whether or not that you could survive at that time and place in a rural Kentucky atmosphere. So I settled in Louisville and quickly found myself immersed with understanding that what you learned in law school has absolutely nothing to do oftentimes with the practice of law, particularly trying to make a living. And so one of the judges who kind of befriended me and took me under his wing, a very kind, very, very caring individual, always patient, was Judge Benjamin Show. So Judge Show, most of you may not know Judge Show because he's been gone for a long time, but those of you do, you know that he never closes the door to anyone. And he and I would have conversations, and he would give me tips, and he would think, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and I listened to him. And occasionally I would talk to Judge McAnulty, but Judge McAnulty was always on the move. He was like a moving target sometimes. He was just a bundle of energy. And he would also talk to you, but Judge Show would give you time and space because he had time and space to give. And he was an inspiration to me. And he also had roots near from where I grew up. We talked about that as well. And so he was a great inspiration to me, and it helped me get off my feet in terms of the practice in Kentucky and Kentucky courts. I had a cousin also who was an attorney, and he and I would have conversations about the practice. And he actually became the first African-American U.S. attorney in Kentucky history several years ago. So he and I, we still converse occasionally. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride, and I've enjoyed it.
Most definitely. Thank you, Judge Reed.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Murphy, were there
Well,
any?
Well, I would get to say that, not often do you get to serve on the panel with your person that you look up to. So, of course, but she knew this was coming, Judge Goodwine. Her and Judge Payne, I tell everybody, anytime I ever have the opportunity to speak and talk about my career as a judge, I will always recognize and I will always honor them because of the trail that they blaze, because it's not always easy being the first, because it's more than just knocking down the door, kicking out the ceiling and so on, but it's also maintaining that position in a place of integrity. And so I appreciate both she and Judge Payne So I've always looked up to both of them in that avenue. I will say for me, I wanted to be a judge, but I was like, it may not happen. So I don't know. But each one of my roles in my career, I've had that one person that I've been able to go to. So as a prosecutor, Kimberly Henderson Bayard at the Fayette County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, she showed me what it meant to be a Black woman prosecutor. And that is a thing. What does that look like? How do people perceive you? And then I had the pleasure of leaving from prosecuting to going into civil litigation at the city, and Glenda George, who was the first Black woman here in Lexington in the city law department, and was there for a long time by herself. Being able to be mentored by great women is amazing. And the fact that Judge Reed mentioned his cousin, I feel like I need to throw a bone as well to Steve Reed, who when we were in law school, there was never a time that Steve did not come back to the law school every year. And while he was there, he sought out every one of the Black law students to make sure we were just okay. And so for that, I always say thank you. So those are kind of the folks that I've looked up to in my career, and I'm grateful for them.
Thank you, Judge Murphy. Thank you. Our third question for you all today will be, it kind of ties into our actual theme for this year. So tying into our particular theme for Black History Month this year, celebrating our unsung heroes, have there been any individuals in your life who are unsung or may not be well known, but played a significant role in where you are today? Judge Goodwine?
In addition to my parents, I'd have to say it was my high school English teacher. I went to both, or to elementary school, middle school, and high school in my neighborhood. So we had neighborhood schools, and we had African-American teachers. And our African-American teachers at that time, back in the 60s and 70s, were so important in forming and shaping our lives. And they were like our second set of parents, because it wasn't a situation where if a teacher called home and said we did something wrong, when we got home, there was no explanation. They took the teachers at their word. We walked to school, and the parents were standing on the porches as we walked past their houses and took note of what was going on as each student passed. But my high school English teacher took an interest in me, and she indicated early on that I could do and be whatever I wanted to be, and sort of emphasized what my parents had instilled in me at an early age, that if I worked hard and pursued education, persevered, that I could do and be anything that I wanted to do and be. And she pushed me into the debating area, the writing area, and made sure that I was certainly on the right track for college and college bound. And I owe her a great deal of gratitude.
Thank you, Judge Goodwine. Judge Reed?
There's so many that impacted me so much in my life, but I will go with first, my grandfather, my actual namesake. He was the smartest guy, one of the smartest guys I ever met. He had an 8th grade education. He was one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. He was a guy that can go in dead of midnight, make 20 turns to get to a location. No GPS in those days. And can get you back there again the next time after one time. It was almost eerie. I'll tell 2 stories about my grandfather to illustrate. I remember I was a young student at Western, a little skinny kid down at waiting. I think I was 17 or 18. I was just turned 17. My first year at Western and gangly, and I'm up at the administrative center at Western, and I'm waiting to talk to. They call you back to talk about financial aid and talk about other things at the administrative building there on campus. And everyone doesn't call me by my first name. Actually, everyone calls me by my middle name, not my first name. So they call out my first name for me to come back and speak with them. And they said, Clyde Reed. And this fellow angling across the room at the same time they called my name, he stopped. He came out and he approached me. He said, "Did I hear your name? You called Clyde Reed?" And I said, "Yeah, but that's I call myself Derek." He said, "Where you?" Asked me where I was from. He said, "Let me tell you about your grandfather." And he said, "My name is Paul Cook. I'm the interim president at Western Kentucky University." I think Dr. Downing had retired. And he's interim president of Western. He's from Horse Cave, which is kind of my hometown. Your grandfather was the talk of Horse Cave when he built a house in a Caucasian area of town, and they were wondering what that black man was doing. And he told me that story. And that was the major talk of Horse Cave at the time. So my grandfather had no problem being first in many ways, even though, keep in mind, he had an 8th grade education. The second thing I'll tell you about my grandfather is that they had a major litigation that was ongoing. There was a train wreck in Horse Cave right after the Vietnam War, and apparently there was a lot of folks who became ill with a certain kind of cancer and dying. And my grandfather, because he had a construction company, was one of the folks hired to clean the mess up. And so they came in, and all these really high-powered attorneys came in from all over the country to depose my grandfather. My grandfather was able to recount what day it was, the temperature that day, the conditions of the sky, the wind, how it was blowing, what took place, what it looked like, to the point everybody just got to, and according to the attorney who was involved named Charles Williams, he said everybody just got quiet, put their pens down, let him talk. He said it was astounding. I'll never forget that. That was my grandfather. And the second person I give credence to is a English teacher that I had named Miss Bradley. Miss Bradley and I were together at Carter Dowling, and then when we integrated, she moved on and was my 7th grade English teacher. You know, back in the day, they don't do it anymore. They used to do the pattern, you know, we were and I was, and you do the pattern English way you do English. Well, this lady made me write. I wrote 2,000 times, probably, "I shall not use the word ain't," A-I-N-T. That was Mrs. Bradley. She had a profound effect on me throughout my life. And she is a very proper individual, but she made sure that we did things right. And she said, "You have a lazy streak, Derek Reed. I'm going to make sure that doesn't take you over, so your intelligence can come through." And she would make me sit there and write, and she was always on me because she knew me better than I knew myself. And she had a great impact on me as well. So those are 2 folks that I can point to in my youth and growing up that I look to now as shaping me for the future that I had. So my grandfather, we lost him in 1998. But he was a great man. He was an unsung hero. He was. Thank you for letting me talk about him for a moment.
No problem. I wish you could continue to talk about him a little bit more, Judge Reed. Yeah. We'll let Judge Murphy conclude our panel discussion. Judge Murphy, do you have any unsung heroes that you've had throughout your lifetime?
My unsung heroes, of course, is everyone, my parents. My mom, mainly, being that she raised me and my 3 sisters, so just a bunch of women in the house. That alone should make her an unsung hero. But my mom, just her upbringing, she, as I always tell the story, she has a GED education. She picked cotton for 3 cents a pound in North Carolina. That was her upbringing. And but she's now a Donovan Scholar at UK, and she's planning on getting that degree. She's trying her best, and she turned 70 last year, but she is determined that she's going to be a graduate of the University of Kentucky, and I'm so proud to see it. But not only just her determination behind her, because she did not go to college. My dad did not go to college. There was no one in my family, aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone before me that had went to college. I was kind of the first. So didn't know what that looked like, didn't know how that would happen. My vice principal at the time at my high school, Atherton High School in Louisville, Kentucky, Nina Bedford. She is now, she passed away several years ago to cancer, unfortunately. But she was that teacher and administrator that would not let me get by with doing anything, especially anything wrong that was going to mess up my future. She saw in me what I didn't necessarily see in myself, and also just that push that she knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know how to get there. So she made sure, you're going to apply for this, you're going to do this, you're going to go to governor school for governor scholars, you're going to do this. And without her, I just don't think I would be where I am today. Also ended up becoming a Delta because of her. She just had such an impact on my life. So she's definitely outside of my mom and my dad, my unsung hero.
Wow. Man, I think I can speak for all of us when we say thank God for our unsung heroes. Wow. Thank you, judges, for sharing. Judges, I greatly appreciate you sharing with us today. I thoroughly enjoyed your responses to the questions that were asked, and I'm certain that our audience did as well. This concludes our panel discussion for today. At this moment, I'm now going to turn things over to Chief Justice John D. Mitten Jr. for the presentation of the Justice William E. McAnulty Jr. Award.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm honored today to present the second annual William E. McAnulty Jr. Award to another deserving member of our Court of Justice family. I had the great honor of serving with my friend, Justice Bill McAnulty, Mac as we all knew him, on both the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. Justice McAnulty was the first African-American justice on the Supreme Court of Kentucky, and he was the first to hold a cabinet-level position in state government in Kentucky. He also had the distinction of serving at every level of the court system, including serving as a juvenile court judge before the adoption of the judicial article. Mac had many awards and distinctions, and those of you who knew Mac know that he would want me to catalog all of them for you, and so I will. They include the Henry V. Pennington Outstanding Judge of the Year Award, the Louisville Bar Association Judge of the Year Award, the Thomas G. Simmons Leadership Award, and the Metro United Way's Allen Society Leadership Award. He also received the Distinguished Alumni Award and was a recipient of the Louis Grauman Award from the Louis Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville. Justice McAnulty was committed to serving the public and his community, serving on the board of over 10 different organizations during his lifetime, including the Metro United Way, the Kentucky Children's Home, and the East End Boys Club of Louisville. So when Judge Reed says that it was hard to catch up with Justice McAnulty, he absolutely was telling the truth. He was a man on the move. But more than anything else, Mac was a loyal friend who was known for his sound advice, his quick and sometimes biting wit, and his overall good nature. In honor of Justice McAnulty's legacy, we give this award now to someone else who has demonstrated commitment in the profession, leadership and dependability, generosity toward others, and a dedication to the communities that we serve. And so I'm very pleased this year that the recipient of the Bill McAnulty Award is my friend, Chief Judge Denise Clayton, Chief Judge of the Kentucky Court of Appeals. Judge Clayton became the first Black woman to serve on the Kentucky Court of Appeals in October of 2007. She serves the 4th Appellate District, which of course consists of Jefferson County, and has served as Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals since June the 1st of 2018. Before her appointment and election to the Court of Appeals, Judge Clayton was the Chief Circuit Judge in the Jefferson Circuit, where she had been the circuit judge for nearly 7 years. She was the first Black woman to be a Kentucky Circuit Court judge. She also served as Chief Regional Circuit Judge for the Metro region for several months before moving on to the Court of Appeals. Judge Clayton previously served in Jefferson County as a judge for the district and the family court. Judge Clayton graduated from Defiance College before earning her JD degree from University of Louisville's Brandeis School of Law. She began her legal career as an attorney with the IRS. She also worked at the University of Louisville as the Director of Student Legal Services and maintained private practice. She was the Legal Aid Society of Louisville's Associate Director before becoming a District Court Judge in 1996. Denise is the Chairwoman of the Chief Justice's Commission on Racial Fairness for Jefferson County's courts and is a member of the Louisville Bar Association, the Louisville Black Lawyers Association, and Women Lawyers Association. She also served on several community and civic boards. Among her many awards, Judge Clayton was selected as the 2012 recipient of the Distinguished Judge Award given by the Kentucky Bar Association. She has also received the Public Advocate Award given by the state's Department of Public Advocacy, the Distinguished Alumna Award of the Brandeis School of Law, the Alumni Achievement Award from Defiance College, the Community Service Award from the Optimist Club of Louisville, the Louisville Bar Association's McAnulty Trailblazer Award, the Louisville chapter of NAACP Meritorious Service Award, the Interesting Personality Award from Who's Who in Black Louisville, the Champion for Children Award from Shawnee High School in Louisville. Well, beyond this long list of accolades, and it's long and well-deserved, Judge Clayton has dedicated herself to mentoring students and young lawyers, particularly young women and young people of color, allowing them to shadow her in court and providing for them a sounding board for their concerns and their aspirations. She has a strong work ethic, a direct, no-nonsense manner tempered by compassion, a quick wit, a twinkling eye, and a delightful sense of humor. But in short, as her friend, Deputy Chief Justice Lisa Hughes has accurately noted, Judge Clayton is smart and she's fun. Judge Clayton, we are so grateful to you for your dedicated service to our court system, for your willingness to help others, for your leadership among your peers, for your generosity, for your positive attitude. You are so deserving of this recognition, and I'm honored to present it to you with the William E. McAnulty Award this year. Judge Clayton?
Well, thank you. If I had known this, I would have dressed differently. And your introduction could not have been any kinder if I had written it myself. So thank you so much. You know, I am surprised with receiving that and very honored. I, of course, did know Justice McAnulty. It was only one time I did not take his advice and I was wrong and he was right. And he was happy to point that out to me. He was happy to quickly correct me if I did something that he thought was a little bizarre. But, you know, he was a wonderful person and a great help to me, especially when I first came to the bench. I also would have to echo what Judge Reed said about Judge Benjamin Shobe, who was a wonderful man, kind. And I can tell you, when I walked into a courtroom, one of the first times, and I was the only woman in the courtroom as a lawyer, the only Black person in the courtroom as a lawyer, and Judge Shobe was on the bench. I felt like I was home. I felt as if I was going to be heard. It didn't mean he was going to rule in my favor, but it meant he wasn't going to ignore me or dismiss me. And it was just a pleasure to be in his courtroom. And I'll say also the same thing about Justice McAnulty. I practiced for him also. Chief Justice Minton, I can't thank you enough for this honor. I appreciate the fact that the Court of Justice is continuing with its efforts in terms of the racial access, racial fairness and access to justice. Pastor Palmer, I just sent you a private message thanking you for your kind comments and all the work you've done on behalf of the court, and would echo the support of AOC in so many ways to the judges and justices of the court, and to Patrick, another great job in terms of the program today. And it was great seeing my colleague, Judge Goodwine, and seeing Judge Reed again. I remember our conversation, and Judge Murphy, I hope I have the opportunity to have more time to talk with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Judge Clayton, and again, congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. I want to say thank you to the panelists who participated today in a very informative discussion. As Patrick said, we could have listened further to those stories and probably learned a lot that would help us all. So we thank you for the time you've taken. And certainly, Pastor Palmer has been one of the great contributors to the work of the Court of Justice. Pastor Palmer has led us in many, many ways in directions we never would have gone without his insight and his leadership. And so, Pastor Palmer, your speech today was well made, well taken. But I want to say that your walk, certainly you walk the walk, and we appreciate that in the way that you help us be a better court of justice. Certainly, Patrick, thank you again for organizing this. Based upon my conversations with Judge Clayton in the past, I know that I heard this last week a speech in which the speaker made reference to the title of a book by novelist J.K. Jemisin. It's actually a work of science fiction by this African-American author, but the title is How Long Till Black Future Month? How long till Black Future Month? So we purposely celebrate Black History Month looking forward to the way it will help us pave the way for Black Future Month. So with that said, Patrick, thank you all for participating. This has been a wonderful event, a well-planned and well-deserved recognition of Black history. Thank you very much. This concludes our production.